Ask Thor if he can turn me on. Am I on? Okay. I want to invite you to think about the very earliest stages of a romantic relationship. You know, the butterflies in your stomach, the blissed out, the clouds are making animal shapes just for you and for me. And you're looking for commonalities, right? You notice things like, you hear yourself actually say things like, you like the color blue? I like the color blue. You like music? No way! Which is far preferable to the stage which hopefully comes much later on when you look across at your partner and you think, do you have to breathe? And I'm bringing this up today because I actually think there are parallels between the tasks we face in our most intimate relationships and those that we face in our relationships at the workplace. And in one sentence they are, how do we create and sustain bonds that are going to carry us through the joy and the bounty, as well as the destruction, the death, and the disappointment? How do we ride out the clashes? How do we suffer through those disappointments and still come out intact? And most importantly, how do we practice the art of reconciliation? And I have to give you an aside here in terms of the context of this presentation. I had a kind of a rough summer. I got married on July 14th, which wasn't actually the rough part. Shortly thereafter, my husband was hospitalized with a life-threatening illness. He had an infected gallbladder, infected liver, infected pancreas, and then while he was laying there with tubes coming out of him, looking as dried up as death itself, our beloved dog Rosie was chasing a bear across the street, was hit by a car and killed. And then I sent my youngest child off on a plane to college just 2 days ago. So it has really been a roller coaster. And I'm mentioning this because it was in this context that I was preparing this presentation. And when I become frightened, I usually first make inappropriate jokes, which I can assure you I will do today. And then my second thing is I usually look to my own discipline, which is psychology, and see what answers they have for me. And when all those things fall through, what I do is I go back to my earliest, most comforting forms of wisdom, which for me are folk tales or fairy tales. And while I was sitting in the hospital in this horrid place, and when I was thinking about the fear of doing this presentation, there was one folk tale that came to me over and over, so I'll share that with you towards the end of this presentation. But let's go on to the first, all right. Oh, this is where we're supposed to dance because we've been sitting. All right, so what I'm going to use for the next half hour are the song lyrics of Bob Marley and almost the entire animal kingdom. I just say So I want you to remember how you felt when you first found out you were hired by Sierra Club. You walked up on this stage, and I saw you today. You said, oh my God, look at these people. They're all standing ovation for me. I mean, and you have this feeling, and Joan's going to show us this feeling. A little louder, maybe? Let's get together and feel alright. Is that how you're feeling now? Yeah. And I'm so sorry to do this to you right off the bat. I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole now. I'm loving it. How long does this feeling last? How long? A week? A month? Year? see things, we notice things, and we kind of go, why do they do it that way? Right? You know this feeling? I know for me coming, I thought, welding is in liberal arts. Right. Then I realized that child development is in business. Things like where I came from, it was private four-year liberal arts college. If the toilet was running, you actually went in and you removed the top and you fixed the chain, and that was how it worked. But here, you actually are not supposed to touch it. You have to fill out a work order form signed by 4 people and the president, and then it's okay. You say whatever. You kind of close your eyes. Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna feel alright. But then, the honeymoon is over, I'm sorry. The clouds are no longer making animal shapes for you. Right? And things get pushed. So you resort to other things, and you can play that song. Or you could resort to some other things I just learned about today. You could be really passive aggressive and hit the president's car. Actually has its real treasures, as thankfully Deb pointed out. Our people are our biggest resource. You do start to sort of collect and categorize people, and it's a very ancient function for us from evolution, where we create in-groups and out-groups. And there's that error they call the in-group heterogeneity and out-group homogeneity effect, which means you tend to think of your own group as being very gifted and diverse, and you tend to think of everyone else's group as all being the same. Right? And these kind of categorizations and stereotypes kind of help us organize the world, and we've been doing it for a long time, but you'll see they often get in the way of authentic relationships. So this is the inappropriate humor part of my presentation. I'm going to show you some of the groups on campus, and I don't want you to take this personally. Please, it's from the heart, and I'm going to actually ask you to help me guess. I'll give you the first one. Who are these? These are our students. Now, I'm going to have you guess the next one. Who's this? These are our faculty. facilities folks. Colin's looking good in that hard hat. This is Roz's boot camp. This is after 6 weeks. Attributions in psychology. We talk a lot about the fundamental attributional error, and attributions are to what you attribute someone else's behavior. And the error is that we tend to look at other people and think that what they're doing is about their character or something internal, and something that we do is always about something external to us. Right? So I'll give you a personal example. I was driving home from work and my horn shorted out on my car. But it wasn't just like going off or not going off. It was going beep, 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 beep! And then it just stopped. And it was like beep, 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 beep! And you know, I pulled over and I'm trying to figure it. I couldn't do anything about it, so I just said, I'm going to go home. So I'm driving down Gunshire Drive, and of course I'm thinking, it's the horn. I mean, I can't do anything about it. And you can imagine people were pulling over and flipping me off. Crazy maniac. What is this person? You know? And I bring this up too about our institution because I think we often do this. I mean, I don't think the business office sits around at night thinking of ways to make our lives miserable. They may, but I don't think that's what they do. Hester did not personally come up with the IRS travel deal. She didn't. And, you know, student services did not come up with residency requirements, nor the documentation, the ridiculous documentation that you need. The faculty did not come up with a 50% law by themselves, nor the 10+1. They're just enforcing that policy. Nor did I on my campus come up with the seniority clause. I'm the one who has to call you and tell you, I'm sorry, someone else is taking your job. But it's not me personally. And I think that's important to remember in our culture that we're enforcing the policy. But we still get pissed off. So what do we do? So we say this is not okay. Being nice isn't going to work. So I need to step up. I need to say what I feel. And then maybe we revert once again to drinking while you're having any sort of serious problem is a little bit like having a problem with your engine, having your check engine light, taking your car into the serviceman and saying, can you please just turn off the light? It works for like this amount of time, and then later it just gets worse. I want to get to the point in the presentation where I'm talking about some of the frustrations, some of the ones I've faced, some of the ones I know you faced. And I put my chess game up here just to remind me of, you know, when I had a classroom, I was a full professor for a long time in psychology. I had my own game to play, and I studied for a long time. My son actually figured out I graduated from the 24th grade when I got my PhD. But I had studied for a very long time, and I knew my pieces, I knew where they fit, I knew how to move them, and I was pretty good at that game. And then I moved into administration about 4 years ago, and they put this shiny chessboard in front of me, and I looked at the pieces, I studied them, I strategized, and I said, aha, and I went to go touch one of them. And they said, oh, no, that one is attached to 10 other people that you have to copy on this decision. And you have to check with these, this actually affects 100 people. And I found out that I no longer actually had my own game to play. Other administrators will concur that it's all attached to other people. And this was very frustrating to me. So I got this long series of what I call moron emails. And they look like this. Some form of this email. And I used to get like 2 a week, honestly, and I really only got 2 this whole summer. So that's pretty improving for me. Actually, one of my first ones was you, Johnny, I think. Yeah. You sent me my first. No. He was the first one who got to explain to me what seniority bumping was about, and I didn't understand that whole concept at that time. And I just want to put in a side note here, and that is for you people, particularly from liberal arts, who do the narrative form of why you're a moron. We want bullet point moron. Much more to the thing. But anyway, I really did get one of these letters about 3 days ago, and you feel. Put this lizard up to remind you that no matter how rational you think you are as a human being, you're not when you get these. It feels like an attack. And so it's kind of the same. Your brain reads it almost like a saber-toothed tiger is attacking you. You have this sort of fight or flight response going on. It's very hard to be rational. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're sending moron emails, is that that's the response. So pick up the phone. It's much more personal. I also put this giraffe up here because I was interviewing for a job a long time ago. It was actually a group interview, and they gave us this picture of a giraffe. And they said, a giraffe is so awkward that it can barely even get a drink of water anymore. So what would you do to change a giraffe? And I was thinking, it's very similar to when we first see things at Sierra College in the culture. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah. You've been a part-time here too. You see some things that just don't make sense. Like you say to yourself, well, how come a faculty member can't give directions to their own students for a field trip? I mean, does that seem silly? It seems very silly. How come if someone with a PhD in physics from MIT walks through my door and I can't hire them to teach math? And you kind of go, okay. Or maybe a more sensitive one is for those budget managers. How come if you're frugal and you take care of your budget and you come to the budget renewal cycle, they take the rest of the money because it's perceived as you not needing it anymore? Feels on the surface like a giraffe. You look at it and you say, that's awkward. That doesn't work. But of course, in my job interview, people went around and they said, oh, I'd give them articulating knees so they could bend this way and that way. Hydraulics, I would cut off their legs. Which is some of our approaches to some of our problems we have at Sierra College. And I remember I said, well, a giraffe has evolved that way for thousands and thousands of years to reach the leaves on the highest part of the tree, and that's why it is the way it is. And I was feeling very satisfied, and I guess it was the wrong answer because I didn't get that job. But I think we do that a lot around here with systems. You look at it and you go, oh, that's a giraffe. Like, it looks funny. It's not functional. It can't drink anymore. But kind of like Willie was saying, we're going to have to be thinking about different sorts of solutions to those giraffe problems. But still, we personalize these things. We get more and more frustrated. And we get to this part of it. Bob Marley, please. Oh, not the first. We can do that now if you want to. Go ahead, click on that. Okay, what I'd like you to do is if you could actually take out your cell phones.
Didn't bring it in.
Take out your cell phone. And what you do is, in the phone number bar, you type in 37607 as if you're dialing the phone number 37607. You pick one of these answers and you type that number into your message line and you push send as if you're sending a message or a phone call.
Could you read them out loud?
Yes. So the first one is excessive workload. Compensating. number 2. Feeling disrespected is number 3. Undervalued is 4. Desire for more effective leadership is 5. Lack of equity, 6. Communication, 7. Lack of growth, advancement, opportunities is the next one. Lack of resources, other, or I am not frustrated ever on this campus. Willie, you're doing good there.
How about giving us the numbers back? Give us the numbers back.
Oh, we maxed out our votes. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I did that. Looks like the winner is excessive workload followed by communication issues. Is this a big
This is really frustrating.
surprise? Is it frustrating? We can come out of that slide. And actually, we had Bob Marley here singing "Get Up, Stand Up, Stand Up."
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Okay. So what I'd like to do now is, I did promise you a folk tale, the one that comes up that has themes that I feel are most applicable to our frustrations and ways through. And it's one that comes from the northern countries. There's almost a version of this in every northern country, but this particular one is Inuit, and it's called The Skeleton Woman. And to begin this folk tale, I'm going to ask you to do something my father used to do when we were little, and he would begin a folk tale by having everyone in the group sing Zoom Golly Golly Dolly. It was like this. Zoom Golly Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly. And you just do it twice in the beginning and twice at the end. So if you could help me start out this folk tale, you ready? Zoom Golly Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly. She had done something of which her father had disapproved, but no one could ever any longer remember what that was. But he had taken her to the far ends of the village, and there he had thrown her body off the rocky cliff, where it cascaded down, down into the sea below and sunk to the sea floor. And there on the bottom of the sea floor, the creatures and the fish who lived beneath ate out her flesh until she was nothing left but bones, roiling back and forth with the currents on the bottom of the sea. But it was a frustrating, fomented sort of roaring, rolling in the bottom. Well, as luck would have it, a few years later, a naive fisherman who was far from home happened to be fishing in those particular waters. Now, most of the locals knew to stay away from this place because they said this place was haunted by the pain of the skeleton woman, so they stayed away. But there he was with his animal gut line out, trolling his hook, paddling along in his little kayak, when what should his hook catch under but the rib cage, the bottom rib of the skeleton woman. And when he first felt the weight of her on his line, he thought, oh, thanks Sedna, such abundance. I'm so lucky. I will eat, and my people will eat for many days. I'll be esteemed as a great fisherman, and my life will be so much easier. But of course, she who was beneath wanted to stay beneath. And as he began pulling her up, she began pulling down, so much so that a great battle ensued with him pulling up and her pulling down. And the sea around his little kayak began to foam, and his kayak began to buck because of all the back and forth and back and forth. But inch by inch, he dragged her irretrievably almost up to the surface. And when she was just about to break water, he turned and he grabbed his fishing net. So he did not see when her full self came above the water. He didn't see her bald head crack the surface of the water. He didn't see the little coral creatures glinting in the orb of her skull. And he didn't see the crustaceans on her long yellow teeth or the seaweed wrapped around her body. But she was hanging by those long yellow teeth right on the tip of his canoe. So when he turned and he went, ah, and he saw her as her full monstrosity, his eyes rolled back in his head and his ears became red with anger, and he picked up his oar and he began beating her off the front of the canoe, and off she went, and then he turned like a madman and began paddling like a demon towards the shore. But what he didn't know is that she had become irretrievably tangled in his line. And so there she was behind, her arms seeming to rise and as if they were going to grab him and take him down to the watery depths, her breath rolling out like foam on the sea. And so he paddled faster and faster and faster until he beached his little canoe on the shore, grabbed his fishing gear, and began running. And as his muckalucks bore down on the rocks on the beach, of course, there she had been entangled, and so there she was, bumpity bump, bumpity bump, bumpity bump, right behind. And across the tundra he went, running as fast as he could, out of breath, holding onto that fishing gear, and there she was, right behind, bumpity bump, bumpity bump, bumpity bump, till he saw his own snow cave, and he dove into the tunnel, and then finally, sitting on the bottom of his snow cave in the safety, when all he could hear was the great heart of his drum, pa-bum, 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 thinking, thank Sedna, thank Raven, I am safe at last. So you can imagine his surprise when he lit his whale oil lamp and the glow came up in the cave, and there, sitting across from him in his very own home, was the tangled mess of the skeleton woman. Her knee was lodged up inside of her rib cage. Her shoulders were all crooked, and her spine was all awry, and her head was cocked eerily to the side. She was completely wrapped up in his line as well as in the seaweed. And he sat for a moment, and perhaps it was because of the softness of the light, or perhaps it was because he was alone with her, but he suddenly felt great compassion for her. And he got up on his hands and knees, and he came over and sat next to the skeleton woman for a time. And he began unraveling the animal gut from her skeleton. And while he was doing this, he sang, almost like a mother would sing to a child. Na, 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 na. And he pulled her knee out from underneath her rib cage and put her shoulders back straight. Na, 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 na. And very patiently, he took every single one of her vertebrae and put it back in place as a woman's vertebrae should be. And the very last thing is he took her head and put it squarely on her carriage. Na, 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 na. And having done good work and feeling tired, he crawled across the cave and slipped in between his skins and fell fast asleep. And the skeleton woman, who hadn't wanted to move until then because she was afraid of scaring him, looked across the light and saw there in the corner of the fisherman's ear a big tear. The kind of tear that one cries when one has known great pain. And she got up, being moved by her own compassion, and clunkety-clunk, clunkety-clunk, clunkety-clunk across the cave. And she leaned in and suddenly felt so thirsty. And she took a little sip of that tear that was like salty velvet. And she began drinking and drinking and drinking until her many years-long thirst was sated. And then, having leaned in so close to the fisherman's heart, she heard the great drum of his heart, going, boom, 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 boom. And it gave rise to a song in her soul. Flesh, 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 flesh. She sang herself into flesh. She sang herself long, strong legs and wide arms good for wrapping. Flesh, 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 flesh. She sang to herself, long, beautiful, dark hair, bright, shiny, clear eyes for seeing, and brown, rosy cheeks. Flesh, 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 flesh. And when she had sang herself into wholeness, she crawled into the skins of the man, and they were woken the next morning, tangled in a new way. And the people of that village, who couldn't remember what had happened to her in the beginning, said they lived that way very abundantly for a long time, being fed generously by the creatures that she had known when she was beneath the surface. And that is all they know to be true. So you can sing with me now, Zoom Golly Golly. Zoom Golly Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly Golly, Zoom Golly Golly. And this story really resonated with me in terms of our romantic relationships as well as our relationships in the workplace. Because are we all not naive fishermen? We're all sort of throwing along with our line out, hoping to sustain ourselves, hoping to take care of ourselves, when what should our hook catch but treasure? And we have treasure here at this school. But we don't know it's treasure yet because we still have to go through all the rest of the steps. Right? So we have the sort of the